All right, every time I tell someone I do 3D printing, specifically resin, I seem to get the same questions over and over again. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm not an expert, I'm just a few months into this thing, but I still have made enough mistakes to have my own opinion at this point. So tonight I'm going to answer the top 5 questions that people seem to keep asking about resin printing on a regular basis. The first question I get is resin printing actually safe? Shorter answer is yes. It can be if you respect it. So resin isn't something you just casually splash around. It is a chemical. So that means you don't want it on your skin, you don't want to breathe in the fumes in a small enclosed area, you definitely don't want it in your eyes. So that said, with gloves, proper ventilation, a face mask, eyeglasses if you prefer, it is definitely manageable. So I treat it like working in a garage with paint or stain. If you respect the material, it should be fairly safe. So a couple key things to consider. Always, always, always wear your gloves when handling this stuff. This is a brand new bottle. Technically I should be wearing gloves with this, but I'm not going to tell anyone if you don't. Ventilation does matter. So over here behind me to my left, I do have an air purifier that is directly hooked up to my 3D printer, my resin printer specifically. That sends the air from the printer through the air purifier, and I'm still not in the room that I'm directly printing in on a regular basis. So that is just an extra safety precaution that I take, is to have that air purifier in a pretty open area. I closed off from the rest of the house. Another thing you want to consider is don't cure uncured resin in the open. For me, I have a product by Elegoo here. It's that orange one there. It is a wash and cure station. Question number 2. Why do prints fail? There could be a number of reasons why prints fail. My first reason for having failed prints is just pure inexperience. I didn't know what I was getting into when I first got my 3D printer, and that's okay. I watched a ton of other YouTube videos. There's a bunch of great creators out there that fully explain every step of the way and how to do your resin prints from start to finish. For me, I had my first mistake on day 1, and I think it was a huge learning moment, and I'm super glad I actually made that mistake. I did the rook that Elegoo has in their slicing software, and when I was taking it off the build plate, it broke. My very first print ever, as I was taking it off the build plate, it was super demoralizing in that moment, especially on camera doing all this, and you can see that back in another video that's linked here, but I learned a lot, and I think that was the biggest takeaway from that. Another reason other than my experience why my prints seem to fail, I'm going to consult my notes, by the way, as we're going through this. Like I said, most of my failures have been human error or my inexperience. Other things that could happen to you guys are supports could be too light in your slicing software. The orientation, so the way it's facing in your slicing software, could be wrong. You could not hollow it out properly, and there's a couple other things that you can do in the slicer that could either make or break the print, whether it's the thickness of the walls of the resin, curing times for each layer. Those types of things are all very specific, and it's very unique to each different printer. So my recommendation is, if you have a specific printer, find a good creator out there. My printer of choice at the moment is the Saturn 4 Ultra 16K. So if you're following along with me and you have more questions, there are other great creators out there that go into super fine detail about the slicing software, about layer thickness, about all that kind of stuff that you guys can follow along with there. We're gonna get there some point. I just choose not to do that quite yet because the technical stuff isn't always super fun for me. My last thought as to why prints could fail: resin temperature can actually affect the print as well. Your ambient room temperature can affect the print. All of these things are something to consider when you're going in for your first initial prints. All right, question number 3. People tend to ask, is it as messy as people say? I would say yes, but it's a controlled mess. Just to clarify, it's sticky, it drips, you'll get resin on gloves constantly, and cleanup takes intention. But once you create a system like having silicone mats, paper towels, a wash station, it kind of becomes a routine and you kind of get used to it, and it becomes less of a mess and more of just a process, part of the normal workflow of a 3D print. Question 4, is resin better than filament? That's a tough one to answer. My first question in response to that is better for what specifically? For me, I love TTRPGs. I like making miniature figures. So when it comes to resin printing and 3D printing in general, does filament beat out resin when it comes to super fine detail? My answer is absolutely not. There are definitely some printers out there now that are getting very close with their detail and are also getting that very smooth ironed effect, is what some people are calling it. Here's the two big things. If you're printing really, really small products, resin printing might be your preferred choice. If you're doing anything larger, like again in the TTRPG community, if you're building terrain, if you're building giant models of things, if you wanted to make a basketball, one of those things are definitely better on the FDM printers. The FDM printers are larger, so you do get a bigger build plate, which is awesome for the bigger products. There are some 3D printers out there that have a certain width, but you can continue printing for an extended period of time, and it just keeps going as if it's on like a treadmill. Those are very cool, and I do want to see that at some point. I don't have one now, but we'll see down the road. FDM printers also cover things like functional strength. You can do things like carbon fiber printing on an FDM printer. There are other resins out there that have different textures and clarities and different build strengths for things like different machine components that you could build with resin. All that to say, for what I like, the tabletop stuff, the detailed pieces, smaller functional accessories, resin makes sense for me. But if I was printing things like helmets or big props, or even cosplay for things like Gen Con 2026 coming up, I'd probably go filament. But like I said, I don't have an FDM printer at the moment, but we'll see down the road. The final question, is it worth getting into right now? My first answer is, if you enjoy problem solving, yes. If you want plug and play perfection, probably not. I'll say this, there's a little bit of a learning curve. It's not easy taking it out of the box and getting going. So keep that in mind when you're starting this. There's a cost, things like resin, gloves, the IPA, which is the alcohol, other various parts that may break down over time, heating elements and all sorts of things like that, which could also be the same thing with FDM. There's space required. You need a big space, you need an open environment for proper airflow so you're not breathing in the toxic fumes. And then there's a time investment. Resin printing does not move as quickly as FDM printers. So if you're thinking that you're going to be popping out an entire army for Warhammer in, 30 minutes, absolutely not. This stuff takes time, it takes attention to detail, and it takes patience. One of the things I definitely struggle with myself. But then I also tend to think the first time you pull a print off the build plate, it could be pretty addictive. I mean, look at him. This is my first long campaign D&D character. His name is Zook. I did print him up 3 times the height. So he is a little guy standing at 3'3", I think, in the campaign. It's been a while. I did want to see him on my desk, sitting nice and content. We will be painting him on this channel at some point. But for now, it's just cool seeing him in person and in action. So it's not just about printing, it's about designing something and holding it in your hand an hour later. So that's the part that hooked me. I'll say this, these are the same questions that I asked before I bought my printer. So if you're thinking about getting into resin printing, remember this, it's not magic, it's messy, it could definitely be frustrating at times, but it's also one of the most satisfying creative tools that I've ever used. I'm still figuring it out, and that's kind of the whole point of this channel. We're going from 0 to 3D. I'll see you in the next one.